Everyone, it's Shannon here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we're going to create this shaker card featuring the Fancy Flakes Cover Plate die, and I'll also share with you a fun way to add some interest to your blended backgrounds. For today's technique, I'm going to start with an A2 panel of Bristol smooth paper. This is made by Strathmore, and here is the pad so you can kind of see what it looks like, and you can see it's marked as smooth. I like to use smooth for this technique over vellum. It works a little bit better, and I definitely like to use Bristol paper over watercolor paper for ink blending like what we're doing today because it's very, very smooth. So I'm just ink blending a gradation here with several distress inks, keeping it kind of in the blue zone. I started with Peacock Feathers, then Mermaid Lagoon, now I'm on to Blueprint Sketch, and then I'll finish up that top quarter with Chipped Sapphire. Once I finish ink blending that, I'll then go back through my colors. So now I'm going to go back to that blueprint sketch and just kind of smooth out that transition between it and the Chipped Sapphire and the Mermaid Lagoon, and just kind of repeat that process for all my remaining ink colors. Now I'm going to move on to that fun technique of adding some interest. I have a damp chamois here, and I'm going to kind of wad it up so I get these little folds in the chamois, and then I'll press it on top of my ink blended panel, and that chamois is going to pick up some of that ink, leaving a really cool kind of texture and design. This is a really fun way to add a little bit more interest to your background, and something different than doing water spots or even paint spots, something a little bit fun. I think the texture kind of goes well with snowflakes a little bit. So there's that background all done. Now I'm going to move on to the Fancy Flakes Cover Plate die and just die cut an A2 panel of 110-pound white cardstock. Now that that's die cut, I'm going to put that aside. We're going to go ahead and move on to our sentiment. I have the Joy honey cuts here. I use the outline to die cut some white cardstock as well as some mirrored silver cardstock, and I'm going to stack up the two white cardstock joys one on top of the other to add some dimension, and then I'll adhere them to a vellum joy that I die cut with one of the shadow dies that are included in that set. Then moving on to my last mirrored cardstock joy, just added some liquid adhesive to the back of that and stuck that right on top, and then finished by adhering that tittle for the J. So now that my stacked sentiment Joy is done, I'm going to move on to a sub sentiment. So I have the Joy stamp set here. I'm going to pull off To the World and stamp it onto a scrap of black cardstock. I did apply some anti-static powder first. I am going to heat emboss, stamped it in Versamark ink, and now I'm pouring on some silver embossing powder. Once I tap off the excess, I'll then heat set with my heat tool, and then I'll trim this down to a sentiment strip. So you can see here it's nice and trimmed down, ready for our card. So we're going to turn this into a shaker card and basically have all our parts ready. I also cut down a piece of acetate to an A2 panel, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. First thing I do is adhere my ink blended panel to the front of an A2 top folding white card base. I'm just going to use a Honeybee's precision glue for that. Then I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back side of my Fancy Flakes Cover Plate panel, and then I will adhere that onto the acetate. But before I adhere it to the acetate, I do want to kind of press off some of that excess glue. So I just press the panel down onto a scrap of cardstock, or a scrap of paper actually, and then just pressed it down onto my acetate. That really helps to prevent any of that excess glue kind of squishing out and getting on the acetate. While that's drying, I'm going to create a well on my card front. So I have these really handy 1/8 of an inch wide foam strips, and I'm just going to go right around the outside edge of my card front to create a well. Just press that all the way down. Now that that's done, I'm ready to fill that well with some shaker components. I'm using the Charming Sequence Mix from Honeybee Stamps. Just going to pour that out. Now this does have some kind of domed like dewdrop pieces that are a little big for, I think, this shaker card, so I'm pulling those guys out. I'll use those on another card later. And once I get this kind of arranged and thinned out a little bit, just not so that not all my sequins is stacked on top of each other, then I'll remove the backing on my foam adhesive, and then complete the shaker just by adding that acetate and Fancy Flakes cover panel right on top. So once that's sealed up, I'm ready to practically finish up this card with that sentiment. So the sentiment's all done. All I have to do is just adhere it on. So I'm going to add some liquid adhesive to the backside of that die cut Joy, and then I'll finish by adhering the sentiment strip right on top. And here's the finished card. I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details. I love creating shaker cards with cover plate dies. I think they always have a big wow factor, and I think these snowflakes paired with that ink blended background and the subtle interest that we added with the texture from the folds of the chamois is another little fun detail. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.